Evening in Israel. This is day 82 of a rather long, hard, difficult slog for Israel. As you know, all of this was precipitated by the barbaric attacks of October 7th. And Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu had outlined the objectives of this war as being to rid Gaza of Hamas and to free the hostages. Unfortunately, as today, 161 beautiful Israeli IDF soldiers, Chayalim, have perished, and there are still 192 hostages not being able to return to the state of Israel and living in captivity. We're honored today to discuss the entire situation and all of the possible fronts that might open up and the long hand of Iran that is behind it. We are honored to discuss it with Brigadier General Amir Avivi, who is the founder of the IDSF, or Habitkonistim, which is a wonderful, wonderful classically Zionist organization. During his years, many, many years of service in the IDF, General Avivi held a series of senior roles, including Deputy Comptroller of the Security Forces, Director of the Office of the Chief of Staff, Deputy Commander of the Gaza Division, Commander of the Sakai Division, Commander of Battalion 605, and Commander of the School of Combat Engineering. He is doing an amazing service for the state of Israel with Habitkonistim and IDSF, and is extremely well sought after by Israeli media, including television, radio, and print outlets. So it is indeed my profound honor and pleasure to be able to interview today Amir Avivi, who I see is right now on another call. Okay. Amir, how would you say the war effort is going? Can Israel achieve both objectives of cleansing Gaza of Hamas and freeing the remaining 192 hostages?
Well, first answer is definitely yes. Israel can win and can win decisively. At the moment, the ground incursion started in the northern part of Gaza. And basically, the IDF has taken control of all the northern part. And this is really a complicated area. The city of Gaza, all the big and well-known refugee camps, like Jabalia, Sajaiya, Zaytun, and so on. The IDF has conducted a fierce fighting, managed to seize control of the north. There is only maybe one small place, but there is still some fighting. Seizing control means basically that the battalions and brigade of the northern part of Gaza of Hamas were destroyed, are not functioning. It doesn't mean that there are zero terrorists in the area. There are terrorists spread in tunnels in different places, but they are not functioning as an organized army. Always when you conduct an attack, you first conquer the area, destroy the main force, but then you have to clean up the area. This takes time, can take even a long time. So we dealt with the north, and we showed that we are able to completely destroy Hamas capabilities in a given area. And then the IDF extended the attack to the south of Gaza, to the city of Khan Yunis. Khan Yunis is basically the second stronghold of Hamas. We had a major headquarters of Hamas in the north, in Rimal, in the Gaza city, which we completely destroyed. And now all the leaders of Hamas are in Khan Yunis. The IDF is surrounding this area and attacking it, and there was fierce fighting because we are closing on the leadership of Hamas. And in the coming week, 2, 3, whatever time it takes, we can find ourselves in a situation where engaging with the leadership of Hamas and destroying them. And this is a very defining and meaningful moment. And at the same time, while we're operating in Khan Yunis, the IDF 2 days ago launched a major attack on the central camps of Gaza area with several camps, Dir el-Balach, El-Burej, Nuseirat. So a big part of Gaza, the central part. And there is a whole division that is attacking the central camps. So basically, we have a division controlling the north, we have a division attacking the central camps of Gaza, and we have a division with many brigades attacking Khan Yunis. These 3 efforts in the coming weeks should bring Hamas to its knees and destroy Hamas as a governmental and military entity. Again, this doesn't mean that afterwards we won't have a very long time to deal with cleaning up the Gaza Strip. We still, at this stage, are not seizing control of Rafah and the Rafah crossing. At the moment, all the Palestinian citizens are pushed into Rafah and into the coastal area where Gush Katif was. And but we're attacking almost the whole area of Gaza on the ground, destroying the battalions of Hamas. And this will bring Hamas on its knees at the end of the day and hopefully also destroy their leadership. As we are doing that, we are hoping to reach the places where the hostages are and release them. It's complicated, it's difficult, but we'll do, and the army is doing everything possible to really find the hostages and bring them back. We assume they are all in Gaza, so once we are still in control of Gaza, we're supposed to be able to also arrive to the places where they are and liberate them. So I would expect in a month, maybe a month and a half, I don't know how much time exactly, that will take control of the Gaza Strip. Then at that stage, when we destroy the major capabilities of Hamas, pull many of the forces out, leave a major force that will continue cleaning the area and dismantling the whole terror infrastructure of Hamas. And then the whole capabilities of IDF will be moved to the north to deal with Hezbollah.
So first of all, you mentioned Gush Katif. We remember, sadly, the days of the Hitnatkut. Back in 2005, the evacuation of every Jewish remnant of life from Gaza. How seriously right now would any Israeli take any proposals of land for peace? How popular would that be now after? Do you think they've learned the lessons of the withdrawal from Gaza?
Asking how popular it will be to suggest going back to Gush Katif.
Or to suggest, the creation of a Palestinian state to withdraw from parts of the West Bank, etc., or Judea and Samaria.
So I think very unpopular. I think there are, overall, theoretically speaking, 3 models of existence or non-existence in the land of Israel that we need to understand. One model is, we'll call it the separation model, meaning we are here, they are there. This is what we did in Gaza. Huge failure. If we would have done that in the mountains of Judea and Samaria, basically Israel would have ceased to exist. We couldn't even win a reality like that. If Hamas had 17 years to build all this unbelievable infrastructure on the mountains above the coastal area of Israel, The IDF couldn't even have one. We would have needed 20 IDF. So this is not an option. And we saw it in Gaza. It creates a reality where the other side can grow exponentially its military capabilities to an extent that creates a reality where we might not even be able to win. So this is not an option. So then you would have people saying, you know what, okay, true, we cannot really disengage, we just separate. So let's have military control. Let's put military in the Jordan Valley, maybe in some other places, but we don't need towns. We can deal with just military control. So this kind of thinking was applied in Iraq. This kind of thinking was applied in Afghanistan. This kind of thinking was applied in South Lebanon. And all of them, it failed miserably. And it failed miserably for two reasons. One, there is no long-term legitimation to be in a place where you are just controlling militarily and you don't have citizens of your own. You cannot put an army endlessly in a place which supposedly is not yours. And the other thing is that when you don't have massive presence of Israeli citizens driving along the roads and creating life in these roads, then you see a phenomena like we saw in Iraq, Afghanistan, and South Lebanon. The army closes itself in bases, and then to move from one place to another, you need convoys, and you deal with improvised explosive devices and attacks. The American troops in Iraq and Afghanistan suffered thousands of casualties in these convoys on the roads, the same in South Lebanon. And at the end of the day, from all these places, there was a retreat. So if somebody says, let's put just an army, let's say in the Jordan Valley or in the cities, for how long? And once it's not there, you go back to stage one, separation. You went to separation, you're basically saying, let's destroy Israel. So even looking at Gaza, we understand that the day after, if we don't want, again, a terror army, we need to control the Egyptian border. We need full freedom of operation for the IDF everywhere. And this needs to be forever, because if we withdraw, then we go back to separation. Unless there is massive voluntary immigration from Gaza elsewhere. But if not, you need to be there. So I'm thinking, okay, we'll put the army on the Egyptian border, we'll have full freedom of operation, and this for how long? For 10 years, for 5 years, for 15 years, without Jewish towns. There will be a day when somebody will say, or the world will say, why are you staying there? Why are you keeping the military in this area? And then there might be again a retreat, and then we go back to square one. Separation and terror army on the other side. So the only viable existence in the land of Israel is massive presence of Jews in the land of Israel and along all our borders. Now, Gush Katif wasn't built by the right. It wasn't built by religious Zionists. It was built by the left for security reasons, because they understood that we have to control the Egyptian border. The same when we were in Sinai Peninsula. The reason why they built the Amit and all the towns attached to Gaza on the Sinai Peninsula side, it was to detach Gaza from the Sinai Peninsula, understanding that you don't want things going in Gaza and losing control in this area. So I would say there is a deep connection between our national security needs and the overall aspiration of people to settle the land and live in the land. Now, this idea of how settling or building Jewish towns enhances security, it's not just about Gaza or Judea and Samaria. You see it in the Negev, you see it in the Galil. In the operation 2.5 years ago in Gaza, the road between Beersheba and Dimona was closed for 3 days. 3 days, nobody could drive on the road. Why? For one reason. There is no Jewish towns, it's all Bedouins. And what happened then is that the army couldn't bring munition to the most important Air Force base, which is located exactly in the middle of this road, to Nevatim. So this had strategic implications. And this is just because we don't have Jewish towns along the road in the Negev. This is not about Judah and Samaria or Gaza. The same goes for the Galil. The logistic general a few years ago retired and interviewed on the newspapers and said an amazing phrase. He said, in war, Israel is not going to go through Wadi Ara. Wadi Ara is one of 2 roads that goes from the center of Israel to the north. So basically, he was saying there is only 2 roads which the IDF can go through when it goes to fight Hezbollah. And he's saying in one of them, we're not going to go. Why? Because this road is in Damascus, it's in Lebanon, it's God forbid in Judah and Samaria. No, it's in the Galil. But there is only one problem. There is no Jewish towns along the road, it's just Israeli Arabs. So there is a huge connection between where Jewish towns are connected in the land of Israel, in the Negev, in the Galil, in Judah and Samaria, or maybe in the future in Gaza, and our security. And this is something that we have to understand strategically and look at it in the long term.
Many questions. There are many. You are a secular Zionist. You do not walk around with a kippah on your head. There are many intellectuals in the United States that equate the Israeli attachment to the land and the need for defensible borders that you and I believe in with the zealotry and barbarism of Hamas. Can you disabuse them? They feel that this is like a fundamental premise that they have, the attachment to the land, that if they would just give up the land, that there would be 2 states living side by side in peace and security. Can you please disabuse them of these illusions?
Yeah, I think that the only land Muslims are attached to is the land of Berlin. They all seem to be immigrating from all the Middle East and Africa. I don't know what attachment they're talking about. The Jews that are attached to their lands, I don't know. We've seen massive migration from Gaza in the last decade. 300,000 people left Gaza. Every single survey that has been done in Gaza before the war, 60-70% of the people said they want to immigrate. And now after what's going on and this big war, I'm sure that there will be huge motivation to emigrate. But what we are witnessing overall, the whole Israeli-Arab conflict is a religious one. People think it's about land. It's about beliefs. It's about ideology. And Hamas, in this sense, is a very, very radical ideological organization devoted to the destruction of Jews, not only Israelis. And we see what this education has brought them to, barbaric behavior.
Okay. Speaking of the North, today there's been 18 attacks from Hezbollah from the North. First of all, how well has UN Security Council Resolution 1701 worked? What kind of independence does the Lebanese armed forces have from Hezbollah? What kind of independence does UNIFIL have from Hezbollah? Could you just give us an overview and what do you think it would take to make the Israelis from the north feel secure to return to their homes in Metula, etc.?
So, as you mentioned, Sarah, there are 3 major players the Lebanese army, UNIFIL, which is a UN force, and the Hezbollah. Hezbollah is completely dominating everything. They didn't really adhere to anything that has to do with Resolution 1701, which calls for the full withdrawal of Hezbollah north of the Litani. Hezbollah's forces are deep in the south of Lebanon on the Israeli border, and UNIFIL is not doing anything about it, and the Lebanese army are not doing anything about it. And there is a big question whether the international community, in an attempt to avoid the big war in the north, are able to implement this resolution and force Hezbollah to retreat. It's not clear. And really we're facing a reality where we have only two choices: either war with Lebanon and militarily destroy Hezbollah forces and push them north of the Litani, or implementing Resolution 1701 by threatening to go to war and then pressuring the international community to really manage to implement this resolution. There is also an option to try to, before we deal with that, build the international coalition, do the peace agreement with Saudi Arabia, build a coalition, but this requires American leadership. This requires America to be willing to lead a coalition, to pose a credible military threat, not only on Hezbollah, but also on Iran, the Houthis, the militias in Iraq, and deal with this challenge. So I would say there is like 50-50%, the 50% that will be war in Lebanon, and 50% that will manage to push the implementation of Resolution 1701. I tend to think that there will be a war, but we'll see.
Speaking of an international coalition, as you know, President Biden has put together an international coalition to be able to combat the Houthi rebels in the Red Sea. Do you think they're actually willing to use force against the Houthis?
I can say in the last 2 years, I spoke and wrote a lot about Iran's strategic goal to control the strains in the Middle East and beyond. Iran is aspiring to control Hormuz strains, Bab el-Mandab, but also Gibraltar. And I wrote a lot about Gibraltar and the Iranian attempt to take over Morocco and the weaponized Polisario. And I did hear many people talking about that. And last week, Iran threatened to close Gibraltar. So if Iran becomes nuclear, or if their aggression is not met with serious military threat or military power, they will disrupt the whole world trade. This is what they are doing. And it's not enough just to bring ships that will accompany trading ships. You need to deal militarily with these threats of the Houthis and Iran. I think that, for example, one attack and sinking the Iranian Navy might be a good answer for what they're doing. There are many ways to send the clear message to Iran that if they continue on this path, they will be destroyed. You can do it by sinking some ships, you can do it by closing Hormuz to Iranian ships. You can do many things, but the America needs to decide what they want to do.
And it seems like closing the waterways from shipping is a casus belli, which is what the Iranian Houthi rebels are trying to do. But there are many. I don't know what the plural is of casus belli, but there are many, coming from and where Iran is pulling the strings, and certainly what Iran has been doing in the north. Returning to the north, we know that Iran has at least, or Hezbollah has at least 150,000 missiles, some of which have been converted into precision-guided munitions. I think they're much more sophisticated than Gaza. And they might be able to attack really essential places of Israel's infrastructure, like the nuclear reactor in Dimona or the coastal plain where most Israelis live, hospitals, the electric grid. Is Israel prepared? And do they have enough defensive shields to be able to actually go to war against Hezbollah in the north?
So yes, it's a whole different scale. It's a much bigger danger to major infrastructure in Israel. We have to differ between rockets and missiles. They have many rockets. These rockets, the trajectory, it's easier to deal with them. They have a few hundreds, maybe 1,000 precise missiles, guided missiles. This is more complicated to deal with. But even if our air defense excels at what they do, it's still a completely different reality, and there will be buildings and places that will be hit. And this is why the whole approach in how you fight Hezbollah is very different from the south. It requires very fast maneuver, and also targeting Lebanon itself. I mean, we cannot agree to this separation between Hezbollah and Lebanon. If they shoot Tel Aviv, we have to destroy all the infrastructure in Beirut and create a reality where all the different forces in Lebanon understand that Hezbollah is destroying them as a state, and they need to fight Hezbollah. So if you get the Druze and the Christians and the Sunnis to want to get rid of Hezbollah because of the devastation that this is going to bring to Lebanon, this is the right way to do it. We cannot just fight directly militarily Hezbollah. We have to deal with Lebanon.
I think, I mean, we're seeing that many of the Sunni Arab nations are fair weather friends, even those that joined on to the Abraham Accords during this war. Do you think that they will have the moral resolve and the Christians, are a minority right now, or they certainly are behaving like a minority in this mosaic of Lebanon? Would they have the moral clarity and resolve that the Israelis have to join in, with some sort of attack on Lebanon?
There's a lot of tension inside Lebanon between the forces that oppose Iran and Iranian Hezbollah. If they feel that Hezbollah is weak enough, they might be emboldened to attack them. But we don't know. It's very hard to say what will happen. We cannot build on that. We need to deal ourselves with these threats.
Right. And I know that coming out of this administration and other quarters, there are some ideas of resurrecting the PA, maybe, putting another person in charge. Abu Mazen has like 90% of the people living in Judea and Samaria of the Palestinians living there do not support Abu Mazen, but they, would want to install another figure and have them control Gaza. What would you have to say to that?
The PA is a corrupt, terrorist, terrible organization, and it's so rooted in their culture that I don't see any chance to change anything in this organization. It needs to go. If somebody wants to build a different leadership for the Palestinians, they need a different leadership, a different organization. It cannot be this very corrupt organization, which the Palestinians themselves detest. Only 5% of the Palestinians in Jordan and Samaria support the Palestinian Authority. They want them gone. So why are we trying to perpetuate an organization that the Palestinians themselves hate? And the only chance to have any normal talk with Palestinians is through the local leadership, through the clans, the heads of the families in the cities, and not through the Palestinian Authority.
So, what sort of response have the Palestinian residents, not the Israeli Arabs, but the Palestinian residents of Judea and Samaria, had to the October 7th attacks? And what is the level of violence coming out of Palestinians living in communities in Judea and Samaria right now?
At the moment, the level of terror in Jordan, Samaria decreased dramatically because for a long time, the IDF was like operating carefully in Jordan, Samaria, all the time afraid that if we do something too serious, we'll get shot from Gaza. But now that we're destroying Hamas in Gaza, there is a huge, much larger freedom of operation in Jordan, Samaria, and we're constantly attacking apprehending terrorists. We apprehended more than 2,500 terrorists in the last 2 months, half of them Hamas. We're destroying everyday military terror capabilities in the Palestinian cities, and this is ongoing. So there are elements, of course, that want to launch attacks and want to do things, but they are under constant IDF attacks. And I hope it continues like that because we managed to really decrease the number of attacks.
Just one final question before I turn it over to my colleague Joseph Epstein, who will be fielding the questions from the audience. Are we playing with Hamas and with the PA a kind of whack-a-mole? If we eradicate as much as possible Hamas in Gaza, will the ideology remain? And they might, call themselves something else, but as long as the kind of incitement and the education that they're getting from their UNRWA schools remains, are they going to just feed on resentment and pass this on to the next generation?
So at the moment, we're dealing not with intentions, but with capabilities. We're destroying them in a way that they cannot do anything. It doesn't matter what they think. But looking in the long term, there is definitely thinking on how to really change the education. And for this, we need to get rid of UNRWA. We need to get rid of all these elements that just radicalize the society. So how you de-radicalize, it's a challenge, but this has been done pretty well in the United Emirates. It is done today in Saudi Arabia, and in a way that completely controls the education books and also the messaging in the mosques. So in UAE, for example, there is a committee that every week writes what is going to be said in the mosques. And every single guy that speaks in the mosque has to speak exactly what he was told. They cannot just radicalize and talk whatever they want. So this is, if it's done in Saudi Arabia and UAE, maybe we should implement it also in Gaza.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And now I'm happy to turn the podium over to my wonderful colleague, Joseph Epstein. Joseph?
Thank you so much, Sarah. And thank you, General Avivi, for being here. So the first question is, we've talked a lot about the infeasibility of the Palestinian Authority governing over Gaza, especially since they are already so unpopular in Judea and Samaria. And Bibi Netanyahu himself, the prime minister, has said multiple times that he is completely against the PA governing. When he was rebuked by Biden for that, even Yair Lapid, who is leading the opposition, said that nobody would consider having the Palestinian Authority govern over Gaza. However, I believe it was a week ago, the head of national security, Tzachi Hanegbi, wrote in the London-based Saudi outlet Elaf that Israel would be ready for a PA governing Gaza if it was to undergo significant reforms. So my question to you is, are there many voices calling for a reformed PA governing Gaza in Israel? Is Israel really ready for it? And do you think the PA can actually be reformed?
95% of the Israeli society oppose this. Any politician who will try to push that will be done.
Thank you. So my next question is, right now it seems that all Israelis are really united. It doesn't matter right or left. They are all united in the fact that we need to destroy Hamas completely, no matter what it takes. However, once we begin to talk about, the next step, who will be governing Gaza, if we were to bring back, for example, Gush Katif, we're going to start to see, I would imagine, a division of opinions. How do we keep the unity, or how does Israel keep the unity that, we haven't seen in a very long time?
So I think that being united doesn't mean agreeing on everything, but it's the way you discuss that matters. And I think that definitely there is a big sense of a unified nation. You still have elements, especially in the radical left, but also a bit in the right, that are not really pushing unification, but most of the society is united, and we'll see what happens with all these hundreds of thousands of soldiers that are fighting, risking their lives every day together, all of them, religious, secular, kibbutzim, cities, all fighting together. When they'll go out of Gaza and possibly Lebanon, they will demand a united society. I'm not going to be willing to have all this fighting. We need to set a very comprehensive, clear vision for Israel that the vast majority of Israelis agrees upon. And I think that after the 7th of October, there is a chance to build a vision that the most Israeli society can agree. And then you have things that you might discuss, but still, I think everybody understands better who are actually our enemies, and it's not ourselves.
So what would that vision look like in your eyes?
Well, as I said, starting by understanding that there are three models that I mentioned before: separation, military control, and overriding Israeli security with Jewish towns. I think overriding Israeli security with Jewish towns is the only viable option. And it's something that we need to know how to explain, and not only talking about religious reasons. It's really about national security. And the other thing is that we need a society that really needs to combine three main things. One is that everybody needs to serve. We see in a war how important it is to mobilize the whole society to deal with these dangers. In war, you need everybody. And this is a strong message for all the Israeli society. We all need to serve our country. And this is something that we need to cultivate. We need to cultivate Zionism, connection, and responsibility to serve. But being all a country of Maccabees or Spartans, I don't know, doesn't mean you have to give up being, a happy society, a cultural society, music, trips, good life, high tech. I think we can combine both. But I think that above these two things, the most important thing is that everybody needs to be more Jewish and more Zionistic. We need to reconnect back to our values. And it's just as God, when he blesses Noah, when he blesses his sons, Noah had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Yefet. Ham he cursed, but Yefet, which in Hebrew means beauty, he blesses him because Yefet represents like the human beings at the center of creation, presents aesthetics, beauty, culture, everything that, of course, God's human being wants human beings to aspire to be the center of the universe. But when God blesses him, he says to him, Yafyafita Yefet, you'll be a beauty. But he said, you'll be under the tents of Shem. Meaning, yes, all this is great. And the humans are the center of the the universe, of the creation. But this is all under the Jewish values. This is all under our eternal values and the beliefs. And we need to combine these characteristics as a society. And I hope that the vast majority of the society will understand that we need to be all of that. Because we're all the time people explain to us, you need to choose. Or be very democratic and liberal, or be warriors, or study Bible all day. No, we have to combine all of them. We have to have a holistic approach about who we are as a nation and a society.
Thank you. So I want to bring it back to the Palestinian Authority. So it seems like after October 7th, many Israelis very immediately became aware that the status quo that we had with Gaza wasn't untenable, and it was a mistake in keeping it the way it was. And that's also reflected in the views of many in the national security establishment that are calling for example, you know, the bombing of Hezbollah in Lebanon to make sure that they can't attack. However, I haven't heard many voices talk about the Palestinian Authority in Judea and Samaria. As you mentioned, it's incredibly unpopular. It also has an aging leader. It's unclear what the secession is going to be. It itself barely has control over large swaths of land, including areas of Jenin and other places. It kind of seems to be the situation where, because I understand that they are important for the security cooperation, I do understand that, and for keeping peace to a certain extent. However, it sort of seems like a piece of glass or a knife is stuck in the back of Israel with the Palestinian Authority. And while I understand you're not supposed to take that knife out yourself, it doesn't mean you should just let it stay there. It needs to be taken out surgically. So my question is, are you seeing any Israelis talking about a plan later for Judea and Samaria, or is it maybe too early to even discuss?
We in IDSF discussed some of these plans, like 4 different solutions to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. None of them include the Palestinian Authority. All of them adhere to Israel's national security. I think that what is going to happen is that Gaza will be the test case of what can be done afterwards in Judea and Samaria and the West Bank. Because if Israel is saying loud and clear, there will be no Hamas, no Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and also not the Palestinian Authority in Gaza, then Israel needs to find another solution. And once Israel implements another solution in Gaza, and providing this then turns out to be a better solution than what was before, then the obvious question will be, if we manage to do it in Gaza, why aren't we doing this in Judea and Samaria? If we think that the Palestinian Authority is so terrible, why are we agreeing for them to control Judea and Samaria? And also, at the end of the day, Abu Mazen, almost 90 years old, it's obvious that he's going to die soon, sooner than later. And even if we're not proactive, the Palestinians will be proactive. The day after Abu Mazen, there will be a fight. There will be a fight over succession And we might see the Palestinian Authority collapsing even without Israel doing anything. It's something we have to take in account.
Do you believe that, I mean, in this case, which seems completely reasonable to me, of the chance of the Palestinian Authority just collapsing, again, as you mentioned, as I mentioned in the question, it is in a very frail state. Do you believe it's better to be proactive than and have a controlled burn instead of a wildfire for its collapse?
I'm always in favor of being proactive. 2 years ago, when we presented the national security assessment that said that war is imminent and we need to prepare, we said there can be only two ways to go, or 6-day war scenario or Yom Kippur war scenario. And unfortunately, Israel chose Yom Kippur war scenario, which is pretty devastating. It's always better to be proactive in shaping your own future, not waiting just for things to happen.
For you, what does being proactive look like when it comes to Judea and Samaria?
What is what?
What does being proactive look like when it comes to Judea and Samaria?
Being proactive in bringing down the Palestinian Authority, being proactive in engaging with local leadership of the clans and encouraging them to take control from the Palestinian Authority, building local leadership, building like local emirates, city-states, and being more proactive militarily, also to dismantle the terror infrastructure of the terror organizations inside. We need to clean Judea and Samaria, not only there, also in the Israeli Arab society. You have many weapons, and we need to be proactive also there.
Thank you. I'd like to bring it back to Gaza. So right now, Israel has stated that its goal is the destruction of Hamas in Gaza. What does that look like?
Well, it looks like what we are doing, conquering the Gaza Strip. It's a ground incursion, it's going in, it's engaging physically with the terrorists, it's destroying the whole tunnel infrastructure, it's killing all the leadership, killing the terrorists, seizing all the weapons, destroying the rocket launchers. It's a war. We need to conquer Gaza and then dismantle all the capabilities, and this is what we're doing.
So there have been some voices, and I know we've touched up on this a tiny bit in the Israeli community, calling for bringing back the Jewish settlement of Gush Katif. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm happy there are voices like that that want to settle the land of Israel. I think that the timing is a bit irrelevant. I mean, we have to really focus on the war, on destroying Hamas. And while soldiers are fighting, it's not the time to really engage with this issue. It's not relevant now. This is something to look at in the long term.
President Biden has, in his administration, have been increasingly critical of the Israeli strategy in Gaza. Very often, they have blamed it on Bibi Netanyahu and his right-wing coalition, which they say are pushing him to take on a belligerent strategy. However, as we have discussed, it has really seemed like the whole nation of Israel is united when it comes to getting rid of the Hamas threat. Do you think that President Biden really realizes this, or is he saying it maybe for political reasons?
I'm sure that in the many phone calls and talks the Prime Minister had with Biden, he explained to him very clearly, we cannot destroy Hamas without taking over the Gaza Strip. There is no way to do it. And I think that there is an understanding that this needs to be done. I think that what the administration is mainly dealing with is the humanitarian issue, But unfortunately, it's not dealing in the right way. The only way to really ease the humanitarian issue is to open the Egyptian border and let the people out. People want to go out to a safety zone, just as 14 million Ukrainians left Ukraine, just like 11 million Syrians left Syria. When there is a war zone, people want to go out of the war zone. And the fact that Egypt is blocking the border and not letting them out is outrageous. And unfortunately, nobody in the international community is doing anything about it. They're all talking about humanitarian issues and yet not doing anything. And bringing humanitarian aid into Gaza, what happens is that Hamas seizes this aid, and then the people don't get it. The terrorists get it, and this is prolonging the war. So it's then endangering our soldiers. So the whole situation in this sense is terrible. And it's not serving the war effort, and it's also not serving the humanitarian issue.
Do you think there's a way to put pressure on Egypt for them to take in refugees from Gaza?
I think this is what needs to be done. I think that if the US and Europe would pressure enough, this would impact the Egyptians. They can also offer money, give them solutions, and give them the motivation to do it.
Thank you. So we have heard a lot, especially in the past month, about the failure of the International Red Cross to provide medicine or to check up on the Israeli hostages. There have been protests in Israel outside of the International Red Cross centers. Why do you think we've seen such a disregard for Israeli life from this organization?
So it's not only this organization. It's also women's rights organizations, even in the US. All these international organizations turn out to be anti-Semitic. They treat Israel and Jews completely different than they treat anybody else. And this is a huge problem. It's a problem, and it's makes Israelis very, very angry. Not only Israelis, I think Jews all around the world. But this is the harsh reality. We have to realize that.
So I know it's a bit too early to talk about what will happen the day after Hamas. However, we have heard a lot of calls for an international solution, whether that be involving the UN, the US, the UAE, Egypt, Jordan, etc. Considering that just in general, international organizations have been very unreliable when it comes to enforcing some sort of peace. I mean, we've seen it in southern Lebanon, where UNIFIL is just completely powerless to stop Hezbollah from amassing troops on the border. Do you think Israel would be open to such a solution?
I think that when you talk about security and overall management, it must be Israeli. When you talk about money, about maybe helping build different education programs and so on, we can have international cooperation. We need to be very, very careful not to create a reality where we are not responsible for the security of our people. Israel has a responsibility to defend the Israeli people, and they cannot give this mission to anybody else. We saw what happened on the 7th of October. It cannot happen again.
Thank you. Now, we discussed UNRWA earlier. Since UNRWA is a UN organization that's supported by so many countries throughout the world, and it seems to be one of the only organizations that's taken it on itself to provide, free education to the Palestinians. How do we dismantle it, or at least de-radicalize it, so that, it doesn't spread further incitement?
UNRWA needs to be dismantled completely. There is no reason why Palestinians need to be treated differently from any other human being on this globe. You don't need to have a dedicated organization for Palestinians. This is what creates all the problems in the first place. And so it's not about changing it, it's about closing it and stopping this phenomena that perpetuates refugee status to Arabs from 48, from generation to generation. This doesn't exist anywhere in the world.
Thank you. So how do we actually dismantle UNRWA?
We say we won't have them anymore, throw them out.
I like that answer.
Simply kick them out of Gaza, that's it. Close the offices and kick them out.
When it comes to closing offices, you mentioned UNRWA, which I completely agree with you on. However, it seems like there are many other organizations as well that have been acting against Israel's interests, but have been allowed to just exist within Israel. One example is also Al Jazeera, which is funded by the Qatari government, which has been really leading the campaign, the international information war campaign against Israel. Why do you think Al Jazeera has not been shut down to this point inside of Israel?
I don't know, this is talking about a media outlet. There's a different way of handling this. I think they should have been thrown out as well. And there are many voices that are calling for that. But I don't know why, really don't know why the government hasn't done that yet.
I believe Bibi.
Oh, Joseph, we have like 2 minutes, so let's conclude because I also have a Zoom now and I need to go on to.
Of course.
I really would like to thank you, Brigadier General Amir Avivi, for your time-earned wisdom and knowledge about this situation. It is always a supreme pleasure to have you on. We would like to remind everybody to please support Amet in the waning days of 2023. All of these webinars cost us a tremendous amount of energy, effort, and expense. We do also, so if you would like to make a contribution to ametonline.org, and as you know, we are on Capitol Hill almost every single day, educating members of Congress as well and writing as well. And please also go to IDSF, to their website, and support the wonderful work of Habitkonistim, IDSF, with wonderful, wonderful representatives such as Brigadier General Amir Avivi. And your website, Amir, is idsf.org, is that right?
.org.il, yes.
.il, idsf.org.il. Thank you very much, and Amir Litrot Ba'aretz.
Thank you very much, guys. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.